In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. I hope everyone had a nice holiday season and is enjoying the little bit of the new year that we have had so far. Thank you to everybody who watched my Anthro and the Apocalypse holiday videos. That's some of the most fun I've had making videos in a while, and I really appreciate all the positive feedback I've gotten on those. Before I get into the review, I would like to give shout-outs to a couple people that are long overdue. The first of these goes to Lorna Sharp, who did my Tim Burton tag back in November. I completely overlooked it. I'm sorry. In the future, I should probably ask people to leave any links to tag videos of mine that they do in the comments of that video so that I see them when they happen and I can put them in my playlist. I highly recommend everyone who has not checked out Lorna Sharp's channel do so. She has a really nice variety of content. The second shout out goes to Saichi, who did my Gothic Horror tag at the end of December. I highly recommend checking out her channel. She only has like 4 subscribers right now, which is unacceptable. She's doing a lot of really cool stuff. She has done some kind of horror and film-oriented content, but most of it is just focused on storytelling in general, be that film or literature. Really good analysis of storytelling, just fantastic taste in media, just great content all around. Please check Saichi out. I will be linking Lorna Sharp's entry to the Tim Burton tag and Saichi's entry to the Gothic Horror tag below for you to check both of them out, but check out all of their videos. They're really, really good. Today I am going to be reviewing Slaughter High. This is a movie that came out in 1986. It was directed by Peter Litton, who is also known for To Die For, as well as Mark Ezra, who is known for a lot of different things, including Home Swap, and did a lot of screenwriting on other things, including doing screenwriting on this movie. This movie stars a lot of people who really aren't known for much of anything besides this film, but it also stars the amazing Caroline Munro, who did a lot of Hammer horror movies like Dracula AD 1972 and Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter, as well as being in the 80s Maniac and the Abominable Dr. Phibes movies. It stars John Segal, who was in Inseminoid, which I have not seen, but I hear talked a lot about in the horror community, as well as being in some episodes of Doctor Who, and it stars Billy Hartman, who was in the Highlander movies. If Hammer and Doctor Who were any indication, this movie is a British production. However, it is trying really hard to pass itself off as American, which it did for some reason in my head, even though I already knew and loved Caroline Munro as an actor, and I did some research on who the actors were before I watched the movie. It didn't register in my head until afterwards that this was not an American production, and I do not know how. This movie focuses on a group of teens in high school who are bullying a kid named Marty. They pull some horrible, horrible April Fool's Day pranks on him that get progressively more and more cruel until he ends up getting burned by this vat of acid that's in the chemistry lab. And then we flash forward to years later when there is a supposed high school reunion happening. All of the former classmates of Marty are invited back to the school, only to realize that the school is currently abandoned and they don't really know who actually sent the invitations. So it's just them hanging out in this abandoned school until they realize that there is a killer amongst them who seems to most likely be Marty, picking them off one by one in brutal classic slasher fashion. The score in this movie was done by the amazing Harry Manfredini, who I believe is best known for the Friday the 13th soundtrack. There are little elements of that sort of signature Harry Manfredini sound in this. There are these rock and synth elements that are thrown in that have this very campy attitude to them, as well as this rocked out version of the Slaughter High motif, which he co-wrote with another musician, which I will put down here. It has this sort of campy element to it that I thought was really fun and really suited to the tone of this film. The actual little Slaughter High theme is prankstery, very mischievous, impish sounding. It has kind of this nya 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 kind of energy to it that is really fitting. One of the first characters we get introduced to is, of course, Marty, who is intensely geeky, but also just really confident in his geekiness, which I really enjoy. He just thinks he's living his absolute best life, but he is also just so horribly oblivious to how cruel everyone is being to him. He's a total stereotype of the picked on high school nerd, but I love him and I feel so bad for him. And really all of the kids are kind of teen stereotypes, but that's kind of what I wanted out of this movie. I went into this wanting a cheesy by the numbers 80s slasher, which is more or less what I got. We also get in the opening act of the film this gym coach who just hates all of the students and goes after them after he catches them in the girls' locker room, tormenting Marty, who they've lured into the girls' locker room. There's a great scene where he's making them all do push-ups and he's getting into each of their faces and kind of talking to them and chastising them and making fun of them, and he's moving up and down with them as he's doing it, and it's great. Once we flash forward to years later, we get older versions of all of the characters, which is weird because they're all played by the same actors who were playing them as teens. We see Carolyn Monroe playing teen Carol, because her name is literally Carol when she's Carolyn Monroe. How original. Older Carol is also Carolyn Monroe, and the same goes for the rest of the characters, which I thought was a really, really weird choice. The adults' versions of the characters act almost exactly like the teen versions of their characters. They are just as immature and pranksterish and not taking life seriously, and most of them are jerks except for Carolyn Monroe, who is really kind of our heroine. I found that kind of fun, but I also just didn't connect with most of the characters. You could tell that they were trying to do something visually different with each one, but honestly, I couldn't tell most of them apart, which I do think is to the movie's detriment in some ways. They could have done fun little quirks for each one of them, which I would have liked, but I didn't hate their performances. Some of the acting is really bad, admittedly, especially some of the screaming, scared reactions on part of some of the characters that I think Carolyn Monroe does decent. Maybe I'm biased because I like her in the Hammer stuff, but I thought she did an overall good job. But some of the just screaming and reactions from some of the other characters was just really, really bad acting, and I'm not sure if I like that for the movie or not, but I can tell you that it's not technically good acting. And we also have a very small part of the janitor caretaker, who is an African-American man. I thought he was one of the most honest and likable characters in the movie, to be honest, but he was really badly stereotyped, and his part in the movie was painfully short. Yeah. Setup for the story in this movie is totally your classic slasher formula. You've got a prior evil done against a certain character on a special occasion or a holiday, in this case, April Fool's Day. This was actually meant to be called April Fool's Day, but the other April Fool's Day slasher movie actually called April Fool's Day, that was a bigger production, put itself out there first, so they had to come up with another name quickly. This is the same formula that the screenwriter for Friday the 13th basically said he took from Halloween and was like, okay, this, and this needs to happen. And this movie basically does that, but twists it a little bit and makes it a little bit weirder in ways that I'm not sure whether or not I like. It is mostly what I was wanting out of a cheesy 80s slasher. When I was like, ooh, fun, I'm gonna review Slaughter High, this is mostly what I was hoping for. Especially in the early part of the movie, you can really see the setups for some of the scares and horrific moments coming a mile away, but it builds some suspense at least in one case. In that way, the first act of this movie actually has a lot of parallels with Carrie. The first scene in the girls' locker room with them tormenting Marty reminds me a lot of that scene in Carrie, where they're tormenting Carrie as she's having her period and she doesn't know what the hell's happening. Different situation, way more over the top here, but it feels similar. And then the way the gym teacher punishes the students for tormenting this kind of geeky outsider kid afterwards, and then they're like, oh, we've got to get him back bigger next time. And then you've got obviously the prom scene with the bucket of pig's blood in Carrie, and in this there is a scene in the chemistry lab with a bucket of some kind of acid. I think it is nitric acid, just sitting precariously on this ledge in the chemistry lab, and you know it's gonna fall eventually, you just don't know when. And it's very surprisingly similar to Carrie in that way. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it does some of the same things in the opening act, which I thought was interesting. And there are a few other homages in this as well. Obviously, they're taking a lot of their slasher formula from movies like Friday the 13th, lots of similar scenes and setups in this, but also there's a little homage to Psycho at the beginning, very, very deliberate. It had to have been intentional. This movie is something of a slow burn, but I think it does pay off for the most part. You've obviously got a lot of horrific stuff happening at the very beginning of the movie. Around, I think, like the 40-minute mark, we start getting just kills coming at you a mile a minute, and then they kind of try to drag out the suspense a little bit more at the end, and that's where the movie kind of starts to drag for me a little bit. It's not the worst thing in the world, but these characters are so stereotypical and undeveloped that these little moments we're getting between them just don't really matter to me a lot. There are a few scenes where Carol is feeling some remorse for what she did years ago, and another character's being like, this is all your fault, you should have died, and there's a little bit of kind of angst and drama there, but not much. And once we do get to the kills, they're pretty creative in some ways. Some of them are also just kind of derivative and whatever, but most of them are pretty weird and creative, and I did like them. But some of them are weird in that they are really confusing and very logic-defying in some ways. There are scenes where blood just starts spurting for reasons that completely defy logic in every way possible, and you're just like, what is even happening? How could the killer have orchestrated this? What even is causing the death? I'm very, very confused. And there are so many fake out scares in the early part of the movie that just don't pay off. You just know it's these stupid kids pulling a bunch of pranks, and after a while you're just like, really? At the end of this movie, they start talking about having to survive until noon, because evidently April Fool's Day officially ends at noon, which is really weird to me. Is that a thing? Let me know if that's an actual thing, because I've never heard that before. That's such a weird concept. They're just like, if we can make it till noon, April Fool's Day will be over. And I'm just like, I thought April Fool's Day was all of April 1st. What is this new concept? And then there is a little twist at the end that I didn't see coming. I don't think it was really any kind of a zinger that really was just like, oh wow, but it was unexpected, and it did actually clarify some of the misgivings I had with the plot that I mentioned earlier. I'm not doing spoilers for this review, but if you've seen the movie before, you know, or you probably know what I mean. The cinematography, costumes, set design, etc. are very simplistic, but they work for the movie, and there are some cool stylish shots. There is a shot of the killer who wears this mask that's like a court jester with this hat with all these jingling bell tassel things on it, your classic jester look. And there's a shot near the end of the film where it's in this big gym, the gym doors open, and you just see this silhouette of the killer just projected up on the wall, and it's huge, and I loved that shot. I thought that shot was beautiful. There are some kind of over-dramatic tracking shots that I'm not sure if I liked or not, but they were stylish in a way. And the weird ending sequence of this movie is very, very stylized in a way that was pretty silly, but I liked the look of it. We also see Caroline Munro's apartment at the very beginning of this movie, and it's obviously this fairly low budget set, but I did actually think it was kind of a cool, arty apartment that would be nice to live in, if somewhat kitschy. The look of the mask is simple, but it works for what the movie is doing. I think it does make for a very iconic slasher look. The fact that they actually shot this movie in an abandoned school lends to this pretty good creepy atmosphere. That said, it might be the film quality to some extent, but some of the shots in this, like I mentioned with Silent Night, Bloody Night, are just so shadowy and dark that you really can't see what's happening. I know they released this on Blu-ray a few years ago. Maybe I should look for that. Maybe it's better quality, but on this disc, some of the shadowier shots are just so dark that it's really obscuring what's actually happening, and it is a little disorienting. It is not as bad as it was with Silent Night, Bloody Night, but it was close in some places. The effects in this are mostly pretty cheap looking. Again, the kills are very creative, pretty gory, bizarre, brutal in some instances, but the gore effects are unbelievably fake looking. I don't know if I like that in a cheesy way or it detracted from the movie. I think I low-key liked it, but I honestly don't know. If you've seen this movie, you tell me what you think of the effects in this. There is one effect shot in this that uses stop-motion animation. It's the briefest shot, and it doesn't look realistic, but it was really cool stop-motion animation. I have mixed feelings on this movie. It's mostly what I was wanting out of a 80s slasher called Slaughter High. Very cheesy, very low budget, very campy, over-the-top acting, lots of teen stereotypes, simple formulaic plot, not really reinventing the wheel at all, but it was fun for what it was, and if you like a classic 80s slasher, I think you will enjoy this. It does drag in some places. I found the plot a little bit disorienting and not quite effective in the way I think they were hoping it would be, but it was a fun movie. It deserves its place in horror history and slasher history especially, and I do think it is worth a watch. That is my review of Slaughter High. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye.